Hi, my name is David Hawks with Agile Velocity, and today I'd like to share with you a typical sprint schedule. So what we have here is a normal calendar, Monday through Friday. Hopefully your teams aren't working Saturday and Sunday. And what we recommend is that you do 14 calendar day sprints, not 10 business day sprints. Now, while that may seem like the same, what we really want to do is focus on having a consistent cadence. And if we plan on a Wednesday, every other Wednesday that we would do planning. If we do 10 business days, what we find is maybe you planned on a Wednesday and then you had a holiday, so the next time you plan on a Thursday and then you have another holiday, and the next time you plan on a Friday. And it keeps the team from having a rhythm and having a cadence. And as humans, we like rhythms. We like cadences. We also do not recommend that you start or end sprints on Mondays or Fridays. The reason for that is if you're starting and ending a sprint on Mondays and Fridays, that means you have a lot of the Scrum events happening on Mondays and Fridays. And so and we have a lot of holidays, we have a lot of vacations, people out on Mondays and Fridays, so we don't want to have those events happening on days where we're maybe not as focused as is maybe Monday morning or Friday afternoon, as well as that we might have a lot of the people consistently out on our team. So what that means is we'd like to start our sprint on usually Wednesday or Thursday. That's what we typically recommend for a 2-week sprint. So let's say we started our sprint on Wednesday morning, which means we are starting with the first Scrum event, which is sprint planning. So we would start Wednesday morning with sprint planning for a 2-week sprint. That time box is up to about a half a day. So we would spend up to about a half a day. We would plan that time box, and if we finish in 2 hours and 23 minutes, great. Which means that at the end, the next Wednesday, two Wednesdays later, we would probably have another sprint planning. Let's kind of work our way towards that. So what happens on Thursday? Well, most teams choose to do their daily Scrum in the morning. Now, it doesn't matter if you do the daily Scrum in the morning or the afternoon or right before lunch or right after lunch, as long as it is consistent throughout your sprint and it's at the same time. Again, we like rhythms, so if it's a dependable rhythm that every day at 9:30 we're going to do a daily Scrum. So if our daily Scrum's in the morning, that means on that first Wednesday we probably did not have a daily Scrum because we didn't have anything that we were already working on, but we would have a daily Scrum happening throughout our sprint, and it's time boxed for no more than 15 minutes. If we've done a good job of sprint planning, that means that we should be able to finish our daily Scrum in no more than 15 minutes. Now, the other thing is, what would we end with? What are the 2 Scrum events that we would end our sprint 2 Tuesdays later? So there's 2 events. One is the Sprint Review and one is the Sprint Retrospective. Now, you can do these in either order. There's pros and cons of doing one before the other. If you do the retro first, then you can share in your sprint review with your stakeholders what you learned and what you're going to do about it. If you do but the downside is if the review doesn't go well, you've already had your retrospective and you might not be able to take that feedback into your retrospective. So the advantage of doing the review first is that you can retro on how the review went. So pros and cons, you can do either way. One thing on the review is make sure it's a time when your stakeholders can make it. So we would have this kind of cadence throughout our sprint, which means on this following Wednesday, we would start the day with another sprint planning. So there's no gaps in between when one sprint ends and the next sprint starts. It just flows nicely right into the next sprint. Now, some teams choose to do all of the Scrum events on the same day. What that would look like is that They maybe on Wednesday they are ending their sprint with their sprint review and retro in the morning, and then in the afternoon they do sprint planning. Some teams like that. They have one day of all meetings, and but most teams I find kind of hate that, having meetings all day. But that works for some teams. Again, do what works for your team. There's one more event that I recommend teams do, which is backlog refinement. There is no set time box in the Scrum guide for backlog refinement, but I usually recommend about an hour per week of your sprint, or if you're going to do it, so some teams will do it 1 hour every week. I actually recommend a practice of doing backlog refinement for a couple hours in the middle of the sprint. I like to do it right after the daily Scrum, so it's just one time box at a time that we're asking our developers to step away from their desks as opposed to fragmenting their day. And so if we're doing that and we say this is about 2 hours, we spent sprint planning is up to 4 hours, the daily Scrum is about 15 minutes. The good thing about doing backlog refinement in the middle and on a Wednesday is that now you have this cadence of every Wednesday we're doing some kind of planning, either sprint planning for the next 2 weeks or backlog refinement that's preparing us for the upcoming sprints. Also, if we do backlog refinement in the middle of the sprint, it leaves a couple days, 4 days, for the product owner to go get answers to any questions that come up. It gives the team some time to do any research that they need to do to prepare for the upcoming sprint planning, and those types of things. So I like to do backlog refinement. Wednesdays are not a nice middle of the week, which it tends to be a good cadence for the team. Now, the other 2 time boxes that I did not mention, retrospective for a 2-week sprint is about 90 minutes. Again, if you finish in 63 minutes, great. But book 90 minutes so you don't feel rushed through your retrospective. And for the sprint review, I recommend that if you can do 30 to 60 minutes with your stakeholders, that's usually pretty good. The book answer says no more than 2 hours for a 2-week sprint. And that is what a sprint would look like over a 2-week period. My name is David Hawks with Agile Velocity. Thank you.